Okay, looks like we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thread to Threshold. I'm Phil Rice, your host, and today I have an extra special treat for you, and that I have the very lovely Solreta Antaria from Melbourne.
Hello. Thank you for having me
Hello.
on the show, Phil.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I just want to say to all the audience out there that, if you guys have got any questions for myself or Solreta, please pop them into the chat in the comments underneath this video here. And I'm just going to check to make sure. Yep, it's all on. And, oh, we even have a viewer. Look at that. So I'll just do that and that. And I'm just going to share it and share in a group. Copy link. Share now. Public. Go. Cool. Okay, so yes, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we're going to have a very, very cosmic conversation today. So I'm just going to read Solreta's bio from a website, and just to give you guys a bit of background, but you'll get a better understanding of what's going on here once we start elucidating on the topics that we're going to cover here. So, internationally renowned psychic, clairvoyant from a young age, Solreta has long been aware of other dimensional realities and is also an ET UFO experiencer, best known as an ET communicator. Having helped hundreds of people around the world connect with their ETs and interdimensional guides to help them assist them on their mission on Earth. This shines light, clarity, and brings a sense of comfort, confirmation, and a renewed enthusiasm on their soul path. Having studied kinesiology, hypnotherapy, and shamanic studies, Solreta holds an advanced diploma in health sciences. Solreta currently lives in Melbourne, Australia, working as an author, spiritual mentor, teacher, and YouTube channel host. She's also a fellow Reiki sister and a herbivore and a mum of three even. And like my sisters, I've got two sisters who've got kids, and I don't have any kids, and it's cool being the uncle because you get to sort of say bye at the end of the day. But so Solreta, thank you so much for coming on the show, and you look lovely as always. And please say hi to the crowd.
Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to be on your show, Phil, and I just love the energy that you bring, and even just talking to you for a little bit beforehand, we have so many similarities, so I'm so excited of where this chat is going to go today. It just feels like a really good energy.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same. And the chat beforehand was really cool. So we're kind of on a good vibe, everyone. So we're just gonna start rapping on it. And like I said, if you've got a question, drop it in the comments, guys. But what I wanted to do is, can you so when looking at this, I think that most people would probably have their ears pricked up by many things that I mentioned from your bio, and but I guess a good place to start is where did this all kind of start for you?
So for me, it's always been, I think we were chatting a little bit beforehand, it was probably around that kindergarten age that I started to realize that I was different. And that for me seems to be the earliest memories that I can remember back to is about age 4. So I remember having like beings come into my room, and my sister and I would talk about that there was things that were in the cupboard that were outside our room. It felt like a bit of an interdimensional portal. But yeah, always being afraid to go to sleep at night and never being able to sort of like switch off my brain, and waking up having experiences being frozen in my bed and not being able to move, and like telling myself like psychologically like get up, like run to your parents' room. So I didn't really understand or have anyone to kind of like share what was happening with me that really got it, apart from being told no, it's your imagination, things like that, until I was 15. So when I was 15, my parents took me to a kinesiologist, which is why I also got interested in kinesiology and natural medicine. And he was the first person to tell me and to tell my parents. My mum was just reminding me of this yesterday. She texted me and she's like, remember when you were younger and the kinesiologist said that he told me that you were psychic? Because he wanted me to go and like learn how to use my gifts. And, he was telling my parents like, all these things she was talking about seeing in her room, they're actually there. She's just like really switched into, or, is seeing things from other places. So it was really around that time that I started to feel safer in some of my experiences, and really that that I'm not crazy, and that this is like a natural part of life. And it's just that my senses were like a little bit more switched on, because we all have these abilities. And you and I were also talking about like spiritual crowd, and then there's like the ET sort of crowd, like there's the different groups of And then there's also like the ghost kind of crowd too, or the paranormal. And it was when I started to get into spirituality, I'm like, finding my tribe, then the ET side of things, being an experience of myself, I really started to feel this like energetic vibration. And you start to recognize other experiences. It's like I'm able to walk down the street or the shops, and you can feel when someone is an experiencer. You can feel when they have the frequency. And it's the same with like ET language or light language. My Japanese friends call it space talk. You can feel when someone actually has like an ET language. You can even hear it sometimes as like a stream. Like I'll hear their language direct. So yeah, it's like we were also saying about, having a foot in each world. So I feel like I've always had a foot in each world, but I've also had that groundedness of my guide saying to me the times when it is appropriate or when it's not appropriate to really speak about this. So even from that young age in kindergarten, I knew that it wasn't something that I could talk about, with teachers or anything like that, because I knew I'd be, labeled as crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I have to ask, so how did you find the support? Because this is something I'm really curious about myself, because this is questions that you can't just ask anyone about. But how did you find the support in your general sphere, like your family and your close friends and that?
Yeah. So I think I was always called the dreamer or called spacey. I got labeled dyslexic, which I now look at and go, yeah, dyslexic, but probably like ADD as well, or ADHD, which is also an acronym for attention dialed into a higher dimension.
Nice.
So I was always used to being different. And I think, looking at astrology and things like that too, I can see, like, looking at my astrology and that, how, I've come in sort of a little bit different from the rest of my family. But I was never, my mum was always really supportive, because I did struggle with schoolwork and with like more the analytical side of things, and being forced to remember times tables, still don't know them. That sort of thing's just not what I'm here to do, or here to have like it drummed into me. So I always sort of marched to the beat of my own drum. And yeah, my mum and dad were always supportive of that, but tried to like give me that grounded balance of, you've got to do schoolwork. You can't just do, like the psychic side of things. So my mum actually said I could look into that side of things and maybe get like a coach or something, when I graduated high school. And the nearest thing that I found to being able to kind of like follow that path and find that support was actually joining a kinesiology college. So after I graduated year 12, and there was just such beautiful teachers there. One of my teachers, Karen Sedgman, she's actually just started putting out some transformational kinesiology videos and talking about Atlantis and Lemuria and, sort of like, I guess, our human history of living on the earth. And she was the first person I met that was, open to the ET side of things and had lived what I would look at as like a, really spiritual kind of like intuitive life. And she became sort of like a spiritual mama for me. So I had to learn how to work and read my own gifts. So it was something that, I couldn't necessarily go to school to learn like the colors that I was seeing. So I've always seen auras. There was nothing really out there at the time, not having the internet and that was able to kind of go, oh, when you feel this, it means this. It's like you have to learn to speak your own language, and you learn like little how would you say, like little codes. Like, if you see a symbol occur, it's like this means this. Or if you see like a certain color, that it relates to like a certain chakra center of the body or a certain human emotion. And depending on like the placement of where it is on the body will mean something totally different, like whether it's on a spiritual level or a mental level. So yeah, I sort of, I don't know, had to learn my own way a bit, but I did get some beautiful support too.
Yeah, I think that's key too, because there will probably be people who are watching this who might be very quiet about experiences that they're having, but they're trying to navigate this new landscape that they find themselves in. And, I'm definitely one of those people. And, I found that when I first came out, I had a business. Actually, it's right here, funnily enough. I made this business card because I wanted to teach people about mindfulness, because I found that mindfulness and meditation just helped me hugely. I was very moody and very hard to focus. My brain would act all the time. I used to struggle getting to sleep, so I used to use, alcohol and stuff like that to help me sleep and that. But, I came up with this idea of like I taught myself, and so that's what I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach people to become their greatest teacher. And this is a very old card, right? And I didn't realize just how real that is, because especially after studying the various mystery schools that I've come across, and I know there's many more that I haven't come across, but essentially it's about really going in and then living from the inside out, right? But that's a scary trip for some people. And but this idea of like you kind of do have to find your own way. You can find people who have had similar things, and that's like I told you, like why I was keen on interviewing. One of the reasons I was keen on interviewing Greg is because he was a musician as well. Suddenly went, okay, that's enough with the music, and I had the same experience. So I'm trying to find people who've maybe had similar experiences, because there may be a few steps down the road. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to follow them, but it just helps me kind of find the next cobble to put my foot on, or an idea of which way to go. And and then because trying to reintegrate back into the world after a little bit of time living in the cave and subsequently wandering the desert at the same time, like a lost soul, trying to figure out which way is up and which way is down. And so sharing your life experience, because this has been something that's been very real for you for since a very young age. And so you're like a veteran in my eyes. And so, you've done some of the hard yards, I guess, and for some people that is going to be even just speaking about things, and that was quite a courageous thing for me too, because I could talk to certain people in my sphere, but some people just kind of looked at me like, and because you can't. I mean, if you've never had a lucid dream or an out of body experience, it's very hard to impress upon someone the magnitude of the experience, or seeing something that shouldn't have been there or something, because if they haven't had that experience themselves, it's very hard to kind of dialogue with them. And even if they might have had one, they generally go, it was, a very short one, and maybe it was just a hallucination or something. But when you start having repeated experiences, and you're like, you're reaching out and trying to find people in your sphere, it's quite hard. And so, the next trip is to reach out like you did. You came across the teacher came across you, in a sense. You guys met each other in the middle somehow, kinesiologist, and you had a little bit of mentoring there, and having support from a family member is really great too. So
and
I can't remember what's going with that.
With my teacher too. She would ask me like what I'm seeing in the classroom, because it was essentially a mystery school that I ended up joining, and we used to joke and say it was like Hogwarts. It's the closest thing to Hogwarts that we could have gone to. We were studying, I think in my third year of my advanced diploma, we were studying planetary medicine, we were studying alchemy, studying Kabbalah. She's magical. And with the parent side of things, I guess, it was when I started to get different things. Like, things have always sort of just fallen in my lap, like different opportunities. So I think it was back in 2005, I was on TV, and that's when my dad's like, oh, this is something, like it started to, that was like a real world validation for what I was doing. Because before that, it's like, oh, this stuff, like, it's not going to lead to anywhere, or, you need to get a real job, or, which I have had on and off, as well as being a mum too. Periods where I've worked for myself, worked for other people, do a little bit of both, like juggle everything all at once.
Yeah, and that's and I mean I've because I've been sort of following you on the periphery, but a whole bunch of people, and and I know you're a mum, and you got 3 kids, and and you've had several jobs, and you've worked from home and things. Sorry, I hope I don't sound too stalky, but I can't help but absorb information, because I'm ravenous trying to figure out a path where I can get some solid ground under my feet. So I'm looking at people, like I said, who are a few steps ahead, going, well, how did they work through these things? Because I mean, this can be a very isolated sort of path to take,
Yeah, 100%. It really is. And that's where it's, it's beautiful connecting to souls like yourself that, we're all here on earth living a human experience. And I think it's to be easy on ourselves and know that we're learning along the way too. And, if we're all meant to be ascended, we wouldn't be here. So it really is, just, I guess, like being gentle with yourself too. And that's going to allow a lot more to open up within, and for our paths to unfold too, instead of kind of like trying to force it. I just find that it's like a lotus flower is an image that I get, where it's like gently opening. You don't want to kind of like peel the petals open, but you want to put yourself in alignment with vibrational frequencies that are going to nurture that lotus and really, help it to blossom and be around those beautiful frequencies and energies that encourage that.
Yeah, and that's really important because this is what I've noticed, like learning about the Eastern schools. Like I've taken my Reiki studies, man. I've gone like way deep to figure out, because I didn't really buy everything that was shared to me. Well, not that I bought it, but it just left me with lots of questions. It was a lovely experience. I really loved it because I got to be in a room, because I was the only dude doing this Reiki. I'm a Reiki teacher.
Oh,
I haven't actually taught anyone. So I've taken it all the way through because I thought, well, I better somebody suggested that maybe I should do a Reiki course, because I was doing the hands-on healing work on people and getting great results. It worked straight away. And so that encouraged me, because if it didn't work straight away, I probably wouldn't have carried on with it. And as a practical guy, I was more obsessed, obviously, with the physical results, because if I've got some kind of objective result, then I'm onto something. But I went to the Reiki courses, and I'm in this really safe, cool environment with all these really lovely girls and ladies, and I don't know how to say this, but like I'm in this really cool environment, and it's very open. And what it did is that it allowed me to sort of let these sort of intuitive notions sort of flower a little bit. And I realized that I started having notions of things, and I would get a bit of when I would say hit up a friend or a family member to come for a Reiki session. Excuse me, hang on. I was able to start sort of picking up on things, and I would just sort of cautiously go, "Hey, so how's your wrist at the moment?" And they're like, oh, well, it's funny you say that, because da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah. I said, well, someone could say, well, everyone uses their wrists and everyone's got a sore wrist. And I'm like, well, I'm a guitar player and I don't really have that much sore wrist. So, but unless I play too much. But then more of this thing started happening, and the more I opened up to it, and like you said, you just let it kind of naturally open. It sort of I just kind of felt myself getting into the current. But what I was going with the Eastern and Western thing is that the West is very much do, and the East is very much be, and it's about kind of finding that place where like I went hard this way and went hard that way, and then I found out where I was sort of comfortable, or what seemed the right place for me, and using that as a kind of a guide to sort of know which way to move forward. But yeah, I found that trying to force things is like there is free will, but there are also like other things going on as well. We're kind of being we've got another hand on the steering wheel, so to speak, that we're not so much aware of. And if we really sort of just allow a little more, it's quite surprising what happens.
Yeah. It's so funny. As you're talking about it, I'm seeing frequency. So how we were talking before off air about like 432 and like different frequency, like music and things. I'm seeing it as though like with letting things open softly, it's like just getting yourself into attunement with that right frequency. Whereas like it's almost like turning the volume up too much when we're trying to force things. But I just want to acknowledge that for other men that might be feeling the same out there, and feeling like how you may have felt, like trying to find your tribe, or like have that courage to speak up. I just want to acknowledge all of those brothers out there that are speaking up, and it's important that they do speak up, and I just acknowledge them so much, because it is that bit harder for men, because it's not something that it's as widely accepted amongst men as it is women. Like we're sort of, it's a little bit easier for us to put ourselves out there and be into the intuitive stuff. And I found the same. There was not many men when I did Reiki as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is like because I worked with trucks and diggers for many years. That was where I started when I was about 16. And at the same time, I picked up music. So I had these two parallels in my life, and I was living in a very masculine environment, working with mechanics and tradies and stuff like that. And I sort of learned how to, take the hits and grow a thick skin, and how to talk with, talk like a sailor. And then I worked in the schools, and I was working in a very feminine environment with children, and majority in primary schools and intermediates, and also I had a private studio. But most of the schoolwork, obviously, in primary schools is a very high contingent of the females in the feminine energy, or however we want to frame it. And so I kind of got an angle on how to talk to that as well, although talk to the whole sort of thing. And here I find myself, and I do reflect back on where my life has kind of led me. And I use that as a kind of like a line that's kind of pointing in a direction. Kind of, it's more like what have these skills sort of helped me with, and I think that's part of the teaching that I share. I don't purposely go out and teach so much, but what I share when I speak, when I do a monologue, like a monologue video, Is
Yeah.
because I know that there's, like you said, there's guys out there that are, wanting to talk about these things, but they might be worried um, about how they come across, because in our, this. I mean, Aussie and New Zealand aren't that much different, and I don't think
Yeah.
even in other parts of the world, oh, guys, rugby, beer, and that sort of thing, and you know, and trying to have a, and trying to, get into a conversation about the greater reality, which is, I think I put it on Greg's video, was like, wanted to talk about the greater reality, and that kind of leads into this kind of question that I wanted to ask you, which is like, how interacting with, or even just forming some kind of relationship, whether it's an expansion of awareness that encompasses little bits of the greater reality, which we could bring in any topic that we've been talking about that is part of the greater reality
Yeah.
conversation, but how that can be of benefit to people's lives. But sometimes people will explore, and sometimes something will happen to people that will almost force or encourage them to have a look down this track. But in general, like, how do you think? Look, being spiritual, that word is
Yeah.
such a, how do you think, like, how do you think, like, I'm trying to find the way to put this, but how do you think getting in touch, or forming some sort of relationship or whatever with the greater reality, whichever road people go down, and it's a very busy road. How do you think that can benefit people's lives?
Yeah. So I guess that raises like some questions for me as well. So I'm just going to like freestyle it and
Go
just
for
say
it.
what I've got coming up. So I get the image of a compass. So it's like you want to follow like what's your true north. So it's really not about following like the south and the west, or like, other people's ideas and opinions of what they think that we should be doing. It really
Mm,
is about like following our true direction. And I think that will lead us to our own unfoldment a lot faster, and our own spiritual development a lot faster. But it's also sort of like being able to have a spiritual, trying to think of the right word for it, like a spiritual sense for when something doesn't feel right. I know you and I have talked about, like getting more aware, or gaining more clarity in. We were talking about like cults and things like that a little bit before as well. So it is, some things might be like bright and shiny and might be attractive on a spiritual level, or feel like it's like, intellectually stimulating. But, does that hit our true north? And if it doesn't, like, looking at like discernment, looking at like the questions and things around that. But I think what a spiritual perspective adds for me is like a soul way of looking at things. So even like I also have a regular job that's not running at the moment too, where I work as a beauty therapist, and I really do attract a certain type of client. I really do attract clients that are open on a spiritual level, and they'll be like, oh, I had this happen, or I had that happen. And there'll be like a spiritual element, or they'll tell me, oh, I really feel drawn to like eating plant-based at the moment, or I'm, going and doing yoga and meditation. And that will just like open a window. So I feel like my whole life I've just been dropped in certain places at certain times. And it's just been, I really trust that divine timing. And I really trust that things are always unfolding for, a higher purpose. At the same time, it's also, when I look back on life, and especially the last few years, and as you know, I went through like a bit of a tough time with a relationship that was involved like with the UFO community, with my ex. What that taught me was to really trust those first signals and awarenesses and those first impressions, and to not ignore that, because like we do get an imprint or an impression of what someone's like, before we meet them. Sometimes, whether it's through a photo, you do pick up on energies and you do pick up on things. It's really to not ignore that voice. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question. I'm a little bit ADD, jump all over the place.
Me,
um,
I'm the same, mate. It's all good. Yeah.
a lot of us are that have ET experiences. I think our brains are wired very differently. And, I do a lot of research, especially at the moment, into how I can really get into that limitless state. I find that fascinates me. And that's the rabbit hole that, I'm currently looking down, is into the science of the brain. And I'm super
Mm,
interested in neuroplasticity and biohacking. And I think, it's
mm.
part of that evolution of the human brain. Like, how can we get the most out? How can we optimize things? And I think psychic sense is really a big part of that, at running at a different brain function.
Yeah, that's really cool you bring that up because, man, I've been fascinated by altered states of consciousness induced by natural means for quite a few years. One of the first guys I interviewed a couple of weeks back, a guy, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so he used to teach Navy SEALs how to use their intuition, and he created a protocol of how they could, basically a 10-second protocol to, as he frames it, and this is the way that you can make it okay for people to increase their probability of making correct guesses.
Oh.
Right. So it's a very sort of PC sort of way of putting it. But he's ultimately, his books are based on, taking a personal responsibility for the evolution of your own consciousness through using meditation, through understanding symbolism and visualization. And it's a really great book that I've got of his called The Power Tools for the 21st Century. And it's basically 8 protocols that he taught. And it's all about even changing belief systems, using NLP, and all of these things, affirmations, and going into, and he's a like a physicist, biophysicist, anesthesiologist, ex-Navy SEAL, Jungian psychotherapist, third generational imaginal. I don't really know. I haven't read Jung yet. I've got it on the list, but this idea that, and I also listened to a bit of Michael Tsarian, who goes into great depth about the conversation of the importance of psychology, and and this isn't the psychology maybe that we hear about popularly, but it's about understanding. It's the great work of self, and the importance of working on ourselves. And I know this from my own personal experience that when I went inside and did the work, I actually started seeing the world start to change. Whereas before, I was actively trying to change the world, and I was a great advice giver back in the day. I wouldn't take it myself, but as soon as I started taking it on board, I noticed the world changing. And and I think part of what that question, what I asked you, was about is like when people have a curious experience, it can make them go, some people will go, and some people will go, whatever. But like, I think what it is it's about finding those people that are open to that thing, and then just, because I've tried just, giving them both barrels of the gun, so to speak, and like blasting them with information. Then I've sort of pulled back a bit from that, and I've learned how to seed information. But I really feel that because I was brought up a Christian, and and I have a lot of Jesus is my homeboy, but my understanding of Jesus might be a lot different to say other people's, like especially of the exoteric understanding. And this is why studying the mysteries and the sort of the occulted nature of reality and the history that we're not taught about is really empowering, because you realize that there's a much bigger story here. And this sort of leads into the next part of the conversation. Now that we're in the sort of we're at the top of the hour, is that this sort of line of history that we've been fed all this time, that's being put out there, which has, even the mainstream lately, like the Göbekli Tepe, 12,000-year-old, which predates the flood. I mean, high technology, well, like 9,000 years older than what we perceive the pyramids to be built.
Wow.
I mean, right, okay. And then there's all these ancient sites that are popping up, and there's pyramids all over the planet. And even in New Zealand here, we have ancient sites that predate our understanding.
Wow.
And this is really what got me when I was, like I told you, when I had my awakening all those years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. I remember reading Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods quite a few years earlier, and that's kind of gave me something to look into, and that's what led me towards what we're talking about now, which is the ET topic, ancient aliens conversation. And I'm still working through all that, but this whole conversation about what I'm trying to say here, it's like, it's interesting, and people say, well, it is interesting, but how does it really serve us?
Yeah.
And so that's a question I'd just like to throw at you, because people say, well, Phil, it's great that you're into all this stuff, but what can you do with it? How does it have a practical application or something like this? And I have my own answer for that, but I'd love to hear, your take on it, because you've been in the arena for a while. I need a new thing. The speech quotations are getting old, but I'd love to hear, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I also want to go back and watch that that show that you were talking about with that guy. That sounds so interesting. Get like a little reading list from you of books that you've read and looked into. So as far as that question that you just asked, I really feel like a lot of us that do go on this journey, and even from a young age, like I remember being like 4 or 5 years old and just really wanting like a teacher to appear. Like I used to feel like I literally wanted a spiritual teacher to manifest out of thin air. Like it, what would you say? And I did actually when I was in high school. I remember having an out of body dreamlike experience that was so surreal. Felt myself like floating down my hallway, and I had this Indian looking guru with all of his chakras lit up, sitting in lotus position, floating up near the top of my roof in the hallway, and I'm like floating, and he's teaching me how to, like sit in lotus position and float. So I have had like weird kind of teacher experiences where they do appear like that, and they are there, out of pure love, because that's an important thing as well, is to always make sure that, whoever you're sort of like following teaching wise, whether it's like your guides and angels, ETs, that sort of thing, is to always make sure that they do have your best and highest interest at heart, or that they do love you unconditionally, and asking them 3 times or more, because like the more that we ask them, or asking them over and over, it's not going to annoy or tick them off, whereas it does sort of like irritate those that have like a lesser vibration, or a more of a darker vibration. But one thing that I've learned from what you were just asking about the question, I remember like looking up at UFOs and things, and talking to my guides and things, and wanting them to sort of like, I guess a lot of people experience it, where you feel like you want them to come in and sort of like wake everyone up, or for the government to like disclose, which they're starting to do very, very, very slowly. So you also wonder what their ulterior motive is with that. But I think it's also not about like waiting for others to come and save us, which I know a lot of people that do look up to ETs and that will ask for signs, and we are sometimes given signs and things, but it really is up to us and our own free will and our own taking steps forward and taking actions forward to really make a difference in the world. And also resonating with what you were saying before about, like using imagination and using, I guess, like visualization and things to really sort of like create that reality, or create a new world around us. And it is through, vibrational alignment and getting into things that are of a higher frequency, whether it's like, eating a healthy diet or meditating more. Meditation for me is something that I do every single day, and hypnosis I do pretty much every single day as well, to really kind of like condition the subconscious and try and, form new healthy belief systems and like do away with the old. I think that's one thing that we need to look for, is ourselves being our own inner guru, and what is it that we can do within us and within our own consciousness. Because I think if we change our own consciousness, our outward world is going to be more positive and reflect more those places that we want to go to. And you'll start to manifest those inner states as outward experiences. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
That's a beautiful response. Yeah, no, that's great. And you're totally right. We are kind of hardwired a little bit through years of conditioning, and even through our ancestry, through the memory that's stored in our in our bodies that we bring down through the DNA. Obviously, that molecule can store memory, and so we but that you're right. Like we have been conditioned to sort of think a certain way, and for a couple of thousand years, we've certainly it's been impressed upon us that there is a savior. We just got to hang around long enough, or we put, and I'm noticing this a lot right now. Just to take a slight tangent here, but there's a lot of hero worship going on in New Zealand about certain politicians and things like that.
Yeah.
And and they're like putting them up there, and I'm like going, well, I'm kind of having to bite my tongue a little bit, but I'm also trying to be real about it. It's like going, man, what about you? What about you? What have you got? What potential have you got that you haven't had a look at? All the celebrities and the people that everyone looks up to and fawns over and all this. I'm like going, yeah, but what about you, man? What's your potential? And I think for me, I'm still doing heavy internal work, and I don't think this is ever going to end. And like you just said it yourself. You've been going through this process since you were like a young, very, very young, and and it's just ongoing, isn't it? There doesn't seem to be any kind of like end goal here. It's like we might even have to come back and do another round, even just to make a few more steps. So we
were talking about it off air as well. Like we're here for a reason on Earth. It is kind of like a school in a way. We're in Earth school. At night, some of us might go to off-world schools and UFOs and things like that, which is definitely some experiences that I've had happen. And a lot of us have come from other planets and stars, far and wide throughout this galaxy and throughout other multidimensional places. But we are here on Earth right now. We are here to help the planet with the ascension process. We're also here to help like our own inner alchemy and our own kind of like personal transcendence. We're really here being spirit infused into body. So it's not about, I guess, having to sit in a dark cave and meditate or not enjoy the earthly pleasures. Like, we're so blessed and lucky to be here in a body at this time. And I think a lot of people that follow the spiritual path, think that they have to be so regimented or, like so strict with things. And I think the more that we can sort of be easier in ourselves and be kind of like forgiving of ourselves, the more easily things are nurtured and unfold. And to know that we're all having a learning experience. And this is part of, I guess, what's coming up as a predominant theme in a lot of the readings that I'm doing lately, is that we do have the answers within. And all of the guides around a lot of my clients at the moment are really encouraging people to tap in and to listen to their own messages and guidance more so than ever before. And I've been doing readings since I was 15 and I'm turning 40 this year. So that's a really long time. And they're like so strong in that we must like go within at the moment. So I highly recommend for everyone to, if they're not doing meditation, at least meditate like once a day, whether it's like 3 minutes, whether it's 5 minutes, like building up. In the mornings and evenings, I try to do half an hour. And it changes your life. If I do hypnotic meditation, one of the ones that I highly recommend is Paul McKenna, any of his work, because he works on hypnotic states. It makes your life step up a notch. And if you do it every day, morning and night for 2 weeks, you'll notice and look back that each time you go through periods of life where you focus and you do it for the 2 weeks, you'll have big jumps and big changes. So highly, highly encourage people to do that. I also have some free meditations on Insight Timer. I'm a meditation teacher on there. And I do have a bit of a hypnotic undercurrent with that and work with binaural beats.
Yeah.
I want to make it easy for people. I want to keep it interesting to our imagination and creative side too. So there is, a bit of a story and theme with a couple of the meditations that I do. It's also on Spotify too. If you just type my name into both those apps, you'll find them for free.
Cool. Yeah. Well, definitely. I'll get some more information off you afterwards, or and I'll put it on the YouTube description so that people can explore those things. Because you're absolutely right. Because sometimes it's like me. Sometimes I need to drag myself a little bit, kicking and screaming, to go and do something that I'm probably going to like, but for some reason I've got some kind of resistance. But when somebody says, "Hey, look, man, here's a thing. Just try it out," and and you try it out, and you're like, "Wow, that was something else, man." I mean, I remember I gave a friend of mine access to. I've got a pretty big library of binaurals. I've done quite a bit of research on brainwaves and frequencies and stuff like that. And I use Sacred Acoustics, the Eben Alexander, and Eben Alexander, the neuroscientist. He works with Karen Newell, and they make binaural beats that use a 432 hertz bass frequency, which is quite important.
Wow.
Yeah. But this would be a great thing to catch up about and talk about even offline sometime, because I got heaps of cool stuff to share.
That's exactly where my brain's going. And I've even got, I just bought this. This was the last book that I bought. It's called The Whole Brain Child. So it's 12 steps, 12 revolutionary strategies to nurture your child's developing mind. But it talks about like the upstairs, downstairs brain. And I think, when you were saying before about it's like, something's good for you, but we don't necessarily make ourselves commit to it. And I think that's where we have to look at ourselves as there is like that older kind of like reptilian brain that we might have to like encourage. And we do have like that amygdala as well that will sometimes, pop up little reminders. Like, is it really going to make a difference? Or it'll pop up like little negative things that have happened in the past. And what that's trying to do is keep us safe and keep us in a field of, same. It's like, it's safe to stay the same because, if you've had things happen in the past, it might not feel safe to that part of the brain. So if I get like different things pop up like that, I just sort of talk to that part of the brain and just say, thank you for, I think of it as an internal guidance system. Thank you for like reminding me or letting me know, but I know that it's going to be much more important if I do the meditation and if I do, do certain things like that, and being, more of an ADD type, which it's almost like my brain is in alpha and beta at the same time. So there's almost like a different ratio stretch that's not sort of like an atypical brain. It's more like I'm within two frequencies at the same time. So like all that oscillation and excitement happening. But when I meditate, it comes together more harmoniously, and it's just the clarity and everything is so much clearer that then I know that for my brain, I really do get the benefits when I meditate. So I have to set an alarm on my phone sometimes if I'm getting out of rhythm with it. But right now, when you do something for 30 days, 40 days, it becomes a habit. So when I wake up in the morning, it's like pop the meditation straight on without even thinking. It's just become a habit. Going to sleep every night, it knocks me out to go to sleep. And it doesn't matter if you're sleeping because your subconscious part of the brain is still taking on that message.
Yeah, you're right. Like guys, as far as a disciplined practice goes, I mean, putting 5 minutes aside just to focus on the breath coming in and out of your nose. I mean, just even that, like sitting there and like that can be very life changing. One of the things I like to teach or share anyway, I should say, is the benefits of nose breathing over mouth breathing.
Yeah.
Because the mouth you can stop your kids from having to need braces and having sleep apnea and asthma and things by just doing all this sort of thing. But these are the kind of things I wish I'd learned, at a much younger age. If I started like meditating at a young age, but that's the thing is like, how can you relay the topic of meditation to people who may have some kind of preconception about it based on a belief system that they currently sort of are immersed in that sort of steers them away from it. And I came up with I came across a really cool short phrase, and that is. Prayer is for talking to God. Meditation is for listening to God. And right. And so suddenly, because, meditation is mentioned in the Bible, I guess why I'm using a few sort of Christian sort of like references here is because, I mean, this is the sort of the societies that you and I live in are predominantly Christian societies, I would think.
Yeah.
And so most of the people that we come across are, they'd be more aware of these things. But yeah, cool. So now I've just got a question in the chat. Would you like to take a question?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so my good brother Max has said, Max, my good Russian friend who gave me this awesome haircut the other day. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Always a pleasure. Max is thank you. Yeah, he knows what's up, and he says, can you please ask Solreta about witchcraft? Okay, now that's quite a general word, but I don't know, like if you could extrapolate your experience or understanding or thereof.
I guess that for me, around that time where I really was starting to go to school library and things, and look into books, that was some of the topics that you could find, like on the occult, on symbolism, occult geometry, that side of things. So that did sort of like spark my interest into that path, as well as there was all those movies out there. What was it? The Craft. That was massive.
Oh, yeah.
At that time. So I did sort of like look into that path and, did look into like positive ritual and what it really is essentially at the end of the day. It's more of like an exoteric way of looking at things of manifestation. So we have the inner, which was like the esoteric, and we have the external, which is the exoteric. So what it speaks to me now, like as an adult looking back on it, it's kind of like learning the tools and learning like symbols and herbs and all of the fun alchemy stuff. But it's knowing that we also have this inner magic within us, this inner ability to manifest. And I think when we work with things on a pure consciousness level, and I see, working with flowers and herbs or, affirmations, it's adding energy or adding power. So if we're using it in a positive tense, it really is just like adding extra energy to what it is that you're seeking or desiring to manifest. I do believe in, whatever you put out comes back to you. So I never ever would want to put myself in a space where I'm looking at it from a negative point of view or wishing bad or negative energies on anyone. So that is something to really think about. Whatever you put out comes back to you times 3. But looking at how you can use like earth magic and each of the different elements within earth, like fire has a sort of, I guess I use more of like a fire inner element when I'm dancing. So I do belly dancing. And sort of like tap into that inner feminine, but it builds that kundalini fire energy, which I know some people have seen, like with my dancing, they sort of feel that kind of like central fire energy. Working with water element and water energy is more like working with the emotions, and working with the air is more like working with intuition. Working with earth is more like grounding, working with like fertility. So yeah, I do have an interest with that side of things, and have a friend that is like really into it, like 3rd generation. Actually, I've got a few friends into it that are, it goes back generationally. and they have sort of like a similar thought on it too.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that even those words, the word witchcraft can conjure and all sorts of preconceptions because of things like Hollywood and
Oh
what's
yeah,
happened in history, and all that. And so, a lot of the general the public consensus is based on what they experience through the general media, and
exactly.
it's unfortunate, like because a lot of the topics we're talking about today, are you can find on Netflix, and they'll be painted various ways. I mean, oh my gosh, dude, I don't know if you've got Netflix, man,
Oh
but
yeah,
that it's so like, man, they have some of the darkest stuff on there. Like they have the darkest themes. It's just rife with symbolism,
isn't it?
and I love sharing information about symbolism because this is how marketing people, get you to make choices that you would not otherwise make. They're appealing to inner subconscious urges based on shapes, colors, depictions, and all these things. But they have much less of an effect on you if you have knowledge of them. This is why this whole thing about searching out knowledge is the road to wisdom. And but yeah, like I really enjoy studying the occult, and that's quite a big word too. Like that's a trigger word because all it really means is hidden. It's just the hidden
Yeah,
knowledge of the sort of the human psyche and the natural forces in the world and that. But I've learned about I've actually discovered the beauty of having ritual in my life,
mm.
which is, I mean, I eat my meals with a teaspoon, so it's very slow, and I give thanks, and I really feel it. I don't just go rub-a-dub-dub thanks with a grub. I'm really, like the heart math thing. That's actually what got me started meditating. Greg Braden is the guy that got me meditating because he
Yeah,
showed me, he did the heart math thing, and I thought, let's try this out. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I started sitting with it, and I was like, this is a good space, man. And
yeah.
then I felt great, and then some things started happening, and but yeah, I think don't be afraid, everyone out there, to go exploring these things. Okay,
And learning, like you were saying too, like learning, it's like learning to read a language, with the symbolism and that. The more that you know, the more you can understand, the more that we're then able to free ourselves from the entanglements of what's kind of like being cast, like Hollywood. I think was it in Dark Shadows movie or one of the new documentaries that's out? And they were talking about Hollywood.
Oh, Out of the Shadows, yeah, wicked, man.
Do you remember what they were saying about even the word Hollywood? So knowing that witch means like wise woman, but Hollywood, they would use Hollywood to kind of cast an illusion or cast or open like a vision. Like there's just so much when you start to find out and research the symbolism.
Oh, they were saying that the Jordan Maxwell says that the magic wands were made of the wood from the holly tree.
Yeah.
Right, and so this whole thing about like, man, like that Out of Shadows thing. I mean, that certainly does have a political leaning because it really only sort of talks to one sort of end, but they still drop some pretty important stuff. And I've tried my best to get a bunch of people to watch that. And I'm saying, look, you don't have to believe. Look, seriously, I'm not asking you to believe anything. I just want you to watch it and absorb. Because when we're talking about intuitive capabilities and building these capacities, what you have, guys, is that when you're truth seeking, you have this thing, right? This pile that you start building. You start putting information on this pile. And this is how I do it anyway. And then what I do is eventually I sit down and I rummage through the information and try to make a decision or a conviction from there or whatever it is. But like, I mean, there's information you can get from the book, from the movies, from your teachers, from your friends and family, from, your experiences and that. And then you have this internal sort of guidance system as well. And these intuitive notions and nudges that come through and you feel compelled to write them down. I mean, there's some times that I've been actually, like nudged by my intuition to write down a dream that I had like 3 days previously when I was just too lazy to do it. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. It keeps nudging me. And then I write it down. And then the next day, I have an experience where what happened in the dream happened in real life,
Wow.
and, these sorts of things. So this thing about truth seeking means that we have to, in my view anyway, it's better and more fortuitous to have taken emotionally sort of mature and approach to this rather than be switched off these things because some kind of popular consensus says, oh, it's wrong, it's bad, it's da-da-da. It's like going, well, it's just information.
Yeah.
And, and what am I going to do with it? How am I going to use it? Or am I just going to be considering it? And so, the fear of the unknown is sort of grips a lot of people. They don't want to look at things. It's like, they don't want to go down that track. And I think that, it's a bit of a disservice to themselves because they might be missing out on possibly one of the greatest experiences of their life. Doesn't mean you have to start dressing up and doing all sorts of wacky stuff, however you take that. but it means that, you know, you're opening up you're stretching your capacity for understanding that wasn't there before. And so you could be, if you really pay attention, that's why meditation has been so good, is because suddenly I'm seeing more things where I didn't see things before. And I'm looking at the same thing, but suddenly there's something that was there that I didn't really notice before. It's like a new appreciation, a new level of richness that I've discovered in familiar things. And I mean, at the moment, everyone's stuck inside, and I'm saying, man, you can go deep. You'll find added value in familiar objects. You know, you don't have to, you know, rely on consumerism. There's actually there's a big party going on inside your head. You know, you'd be surprised what you can sort of get from that. But anyway, sorry, excuse me, I sort of took over the conversation there.
No. I just, even like what you were saying then, part of like, I guess like what I'm hearing too is like from my own inner self and guides is, you know, we think about doing things, or like we put things on our pile or we to do it, like, oh yeah, I'm going to learn to meditate this year. When you have that thought, if you're like, you know, say not at work or anything, go and actually just put a meditation on then and there, because like we do have this part of the human mind is that we do tend to put things off. And even if it's something that you're not 100% sure about, it's not going to hurt to try and really like see how you feel different. And it's not something that we necessarily become good at straight away. It is a practice that we do learn to kind of like zone out. And I've been playing with this really cool technology that it's like a headband that you wear that measures your EEG waves. So it measures waves. And there's cool games that you can get on it and things like that. But it actually will show you like when you're getting into that Zen-like Buddha state. And it shows you like just how quickly. And what I learned from that technology is what it feels like inside my brain and inside my mind to go into that state, so that then you can call that and induce that a lot quicker. So say if you are stressed or that, you can sort of put yourself back into that state so much easier.
That what you've just said there is so critical, and that's what the Richard Alan Miller talks a lot about. He was experimenting with biofeedback to basically change the body's autonomic functions, you know. But what happens is that you're right, you know, you get into a certain altered state, and then you become familiar with it, and it's like, wow, you know, this is cool. And a great example of this is like a lady who who came for a Reiki session. We caught touch base the following day, and she said, you know what, I came home from work and I was able to get into my nice relaxed state so much faster without any effort. You know, like I just sat on the couch and I'm like, I'm really relaxed. I'm not having to wind down. I kind of got there faster. For a lot of people who don't meditate, a Reiki session is actually in itself a meditation, because, I mean, I get people to relax and do a body relaxation there. But, you know, this thing about biofeedback, you're right. You know, you start becoming aware of your internal environment and this is a key, how it feels. And so once you know that acts as like an anchor, like sort of how perfumes can act as an anchor or a preset on a radio station to take us to a certain place. And we can use, and that's why I love studying like ritual related things, because, you know, when you go to, you know, they talk about going into a church and they've got the big stained glass windows with the visual effect of the light coming through, and you're in this huge, architecturally sort of aesthetically pleasing scenario. And then they've got the frankincense swinging, and then they've got the sound resonating, and you're having this kind of like this, you know, it's almost like they're designed for you to have an experience. Well, you can create that yourself. And I think that's one of the fun parts of exploring these things. You know, you have some nice candles, and you start off with your hands together or lighting a candle, and it helps you to it's like a form of pattern recognition where you have a beginning and an end, and you're moving from the profane into the sacred. And what you find is you go into that place and you have a beginning and an end, like I said, and then you get more accustomed to that sort of the contrast between those two states of mind. And then what happens is the doc talks about, Richard Alan Murray says, you know, you get into that space and then you learn how to stretch it. And you learn, and it starts, you know, spilling over into other areas of your life. But you get that pattern going with the ritual first. And I think that's what Max might have been talking about with the witchcraft thing. But that's what my sort of take on it is like, is like, you know, like how is it functional in a sense? It's almost like I said, you know, moving from one psychological state to another using like a set of movements. Like when I get up and I do some kind of freestyle Tai Chi or whatever, and, you know, my neighbors must love it because I live in a valley, and so everyone can see me in my living room, like doing all these movements and things. But man, I tell you, like meditating in a chair is one thing, or lying down, I can do half lotus. I can get my left foot over my right. I'm pretty proud of that.
Awesome.
And it's taken a while. But, you know, like doing these movements and trying these different types, you know, moving your breathing with your meditation and getting to these altered states. It's like, man, you know, the clarity, there's so many benefits, and I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face, people, but there's nothing that compares to direct personal experience. And I'm a big advocate of that.
Yeah, definitely. And even thinking about things like, I know for me, like I have certain ritual, you know, I love to have a shower at night, because I literally feel like I'm washing off energy, but I'll still have a shower to kind of like wake up in the morning. That for me is like a ritual. And if I skip that, things just, it doesn't feel right. But even like for me, when I'm sitting down to work with a client, I'll just pick up my deck of cards, and as soon as I shuffle, it's like, that's it, I'm plugged in. I'm like, you know, connected, feeling that source energy, feeling my guides, feeling higher self. It's like creating, through doing ritual, we create anchors, and we create anchors into, you know, working with these certain brain states and with this certain levels of consciousness. And what's been interesting is the person that's been working with me with the focus band, he said there's certain baseline settings that you'll put it on. So like, for example, you'll start on like around, you know, sort of like 19, 20. So I started that, and it was really easy just to get into that meditation state. For the other end of the spectrum, you'll have like a Zen monk, which the baseline will be on 100%. I'm sort of like hitting the highest scores on 50% at the moment, and I've only been working with it just a couple of times. But it's like when you start to recognize that state and you tell your brain to go back into it, you start to like maintain it for a lot longer. It is a muscle. It is something that we need to practice. And I think there's so much to be explored with the way that our brains work. And I'm just super interested for, you know, if there's anyone out there that wants to contact me, or, you know, has more information to do with sort of like biohacking the brain. It's something that like I'm obsessed with right now. And I do think that certain rituals and things will help to anchor that. Like, for example, I'm taking lion's mane in the morning, which is a medicinal mushroom that helps to kind of like raise your peak state. And I feel like it builds a platform within my brain of which my brain functions at a different clarity and a different level. And I feel it within my system for like 48 hours after taking it. But I also know that I can stack and layer like other herbs and vitamins and things with that state too. It's one of those medicinal mushrooms that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And I'm really interested in how we can network and use different like medicinal herbs and things to increase our brain states and to kind of like, you know, quieten and sharpen the mind.
Yeah, you know, and that's it. And, you know, changing my diet. And, you know, one thing I found is that sugar is like such a buzzkill when it comes to trying to stay in a state. Like if I have sugar, man, like I just get, you know what I use for sugar now? I roast carrots. I have carrots in my, like, that's it, man. Like, you know, I had some coconut yogurt the other day. I've tried having chocolate, and I mean, you know, I miss a few of these things, but man, if I eat too much, even having an apple, and you know, I can't do coffee, or well, I can't do caffeinated coffee anyway. But if I really stick to the plan, you know, I have no problem getting deep fast. You know, but there are a whole stack of like things, and I think this kind of comes back to something we were talking about earlier, and that is that, you know, going from, as another speaker says, going from zero to hero is a bit unrealistic. We kind of have to lead ourselves, and that's why I really enjoyed the. And I'm just going to quickly go off somewhere. Oh, by the way, we've just hit the hour mark, but I mean, if you are free to go for a little bit longer, I can totally accommodate that.
I'm loving it.
Okay, now you need to disappear at about 5 to 11, don't you?
The latest.
Okay, sweet. All good. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Okay, but the Reiki teachings that I came across are really interesting, because when you do Reiki 2, you learn about these symbols. And people will often have the understanding that these symbols are accesses to different types of energy and things. But what I found was the original teachings were they brought the symbols in to help people understand concepts. And so basically what happens is that, first of all, you go to a Reiki class, and this is just me summarizing and paraphrasing a whole bunch of research into like a little nutshell. You go there and you're like, oh, wow, what's all this about? And you go, okay, put your hands on. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, this is simple. You learn about history, and you learn a little bit about energy, and you might learn about other modalities of energy healing and chakras and things. But specifically with the traditional Japanese usui Reiki Rioho, which is which is what most people are aware of, because that's the ones that's kind of survived. These symbols were introduced to help people with their spiritual development. And so the first symbol was about, well, even without even mentioning symbols, it was like the first thing you show up and it's like, oh, wow, there's an energy that I can play with. And then the next thing is like, oh, wow, now I'm forming a relationship with this energy. And then it's like, wow, now I really feel like I'm super comfortable with the energy. And then finally you realize, holy crap, I am this energy. I was all along, but I needed to take some steps towards it because my belief system needs to go through a certain process before I can change it. I can't just go from zero to hero. Some people could. Some people never learnt the symbols according to the older teachers because they didn't need to. So these are concepts, the symbols, the mantras, and it's about cultivating this internal environment. But anyway, I was saying that, the things like the herbs and these access points or entry points into these altered states or different states of consciousness are such a fun thing to explore. I don't know why more people aren't into it. I mean, I know people like playing, Call of Duty and watching Netflix, and not that I'm knocking Netflix, I watch Netflix too, but, sports and all these. But, when I turned off the TV and started exploring all these things, I'm like going, man, I've just found my new magnificent obsession. I don't even care about my guitar,
Wow.
well, I do, but, so it was that big. But, I mean, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but I've got another thing I'd like to go to.
Yeah, let's go to the question.
Okay, sorry, hang on. I'm just going to quickly check on here to see if there are any more questions.
Oh, okay.
I've got there's a couple of people watching there. Cool. Okay. Oh, really? Oh, Gary Cook. Oh, g'day, Gary.
Oh, Gary. I follow his work. I love his work.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'm going to have Gary on in a couple of weeks, actually.
Awesome.
So anyway, let's in the sort of this last session, in this last sort of 20 odd minutes, let's go cosmic here, because let's talk about ETs, let's talk about extra dimensionals, interdimensionals, because this isn't just about some metal craft floating around that might be owned by the government who own access to some kind of crazy new technology that we're not aware of. We're talking about things that are way beyond nuts and bolts. So I don't know if that's much of a lead-in for what you can wrap on there, Sol, but you just go for it, mate.
Yeah, sure. So I think, for me, like having experiences since a young age, it was only really probably, when was it? I was maybe like 18 when I sort of first consciously remember seeing a craft in a waking state. I had experiences where it was like, sort of between that dream state to feeling like, it was like an astral type experience, or having like conscious memory of going on craft and things at nighttime, more as a child. But I remember being on my way into college, like driving on the freeway and seeing something in the sky, which was sort of more of that like physical, waking. But it was also when I was just getting comfortable and not so scared to see things. So they were really working with me to kind of like break down many fears and things, because we are dictated by Hollywood and sort of, like Mars Attacks, Men in Black, movies like that, ETs are sort of more negative in that. So I feel like they were sort of like working with me softly to kind of just get my brain into a state of it's okay to see them. But for me, a lot of the craft that I do see is more what we would call like light ships. So I do really highly resonate with Pleiadians. So I see a lot of Pleiadian crafts, which are like almost like white balls of light. And sometimes you'll even see a being sitting within inside the craft. And, I do have some of my YouTube that I've filmed as well. One of my favorite experiences was feeling so magnetically drawn to taking a photo passing a lake in Yosemite in America, and just feeling just this utter, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like this total flux of feeling in love with life and this illumination of my being and just energy. It was just incredible, and just felt this urge to take photos. And then what I saw later when I got back to the hotel that night was a triangle craft made out of light. And it's in a few forms. And one of my good friends in the UK, Jason Gleaves, who does a lot of, debunking on UFO photos and that, said that you could see that it had like its own kind of energy source with it. And the other thing that was in that photo was this beautiful dish-shaped cloud with a ball of light descending out of it, sitting over the top of a mountain. I have had like a lot of experiences that way. And sometimes when you're having the experience, it might not be that you physically see something, but you'll feel something. And that's when we start to actually make that connection. And when you're feeling something, or you feel like the air change or the environment or spiritual kind of feeling around you, that's when it's really good to look up or start to kind of like scan the skies and see what it is that you're seeing. And what I notice is with a lot of these crafts that we see that are of like a higher dimension or are like of a higher vibrational frequency, is that they don't always appear to everyone all at once. So in saying that, you know, having done sky watches and things like that, there'll be sometimes some people that can't see it within the group, and it might not be that their belief system is ready to see that, or they might feel like they really, really want to see it, but there might be something holding them back. So what we were saying before about like working with the brain and working with the belief system, and, you know, I'm a big believer in NLP, having studied NLP myself too, is that the more that we can break down this old programming and old conditioning, the more that our consciousness is really willing and ready to accept these other dimensions and these other dimensional beings around us and these other kind of like frequencies that we're attuned to. So if we look at like the spectrum of light, for example, and our human brain and human perception can perceive certain amounts of light, we also have like the UV and the ultraviolet and the infrared rays that are, you know, just sort of like outside of that human spectrum. And what I tend to notice is working with like night vision technology and things with sky watching, I tend to be able to, it's like my eyes have always been a little bit different or a little bit modified. I've always had you know, higher than normal vision when I've had my eyes checked. So maybe my eyes are just like more attuned, or my brain's more attuned to picking up this sort of like receptivity, because I really feel like it's the receptor. So I'm able to see sometimes things that can only be seen on night vision. So sometimes I'll see crafts in the sky and a lot of other people aren't seeing them. And, you know, they're there when you put up the night vision. And I think it's all about working with your eyes as a muscle, working with your consciousness as a muscle, working with your belief system as a muscle. And I really feel that you know, when I look at the UFOs, a lot of the time I really will tap into that feeling of what I'm feeling. And it feels like an extension of us. So whether it's ourselves on another level, or whether it's like, you know, family on the ET side of things. And I feel like the big message that they bring is that they are us, but we've forgotten, and we're sort of, you know, walking around in this 3D body, but we are able to work with the light body. And, you know, it is all about vibrational attunement. I'm very much into the acupuncture system and the chakras, and all of that has a certain amount of electricity with it. And what I see when I see, you know, our ET family flying in the sky, or whether they're flying around in their own Merkaba or light body, is that they understand how this light body system works, how this acupuncture system works. And it's all about consciousness. And if we can get ourselves into a state of, you know, heightened awareness or consciousness, which is all about, you know, doing the meditation and doing the things that kind of build upon that energy, working with high vibrational foods. So fruit is actually one of the highest electrical forms of fruit that you can consume, and superfoods and herbs, they have some of the most electricity. So if we think about like building the body electric and thinking about our human body as a biocomputer, and all of these frequencies we can take in as sort of like adding more RAM or more power to our body, but the meditations are like installing and downloading the software on a conscious level. This starts to form a super realization of who we are as an individual, but also a super realization of what's around us and what's sort of going on outside our spectrum. The other thing that I really believe that helps with, you know, seeing spirit and seeing UFOs and things is to, when we see something, if we see like a flash out the corner of our eyes, it's to tell our brain, okay, I just saw something. And that's building a new neural network or a new pathway. And then the next time that we see something, we tell our brain again, oh, I just saw something. That's building another layer. And all of a sudden we start to form this thick branch or this thick pathway or a thick ropey-like neural connection within our brain and form new synapses. And what that does is tell our brain that this is important information. Please, like, you know, when we see things like that, let our unconscious mind or our peripheral vision center us to pay attention, so that we're not just going to pass it off as unimportant information. And I really think that that's how we can sort of get to that next state of evolutionary awareness of what's happening around us. And I think this is not the sort of thing that's really going to be disclosed by the government, you know, if it does start to unfold a little bit more, which people are predicting over, you know, the things that are now being released by the Pentagon and by the Navy. You know, what kind of story do you feel is going to come out? Because it's sort of what's happened from the past is it's very much like a physical narration of things, whether it's like in movies and things like that. And it does feel like, there is a certain materialistic aspect to the way that government does release things. What's your feel with that kind of stuff?
Well, thank you. I have to say, after watching, listening, and absorbing so much over the last few years about this topic, following all the big speakers and some of the lesser known speakers, and realizing that there are so many people that comment on this, and then going, you know what, I need to come up with my own sort of take on this, and maybe something that comes from inside more than just sort of cherry picking what seems right from other commentators. And I think that with this recent reveal from the Pentagon saying that those 3 videos are legit in the sense that we do not know what those items were and they have technology that exceeds our capabilities, I always notice the timing of when this information is released.
Exactly.
Lots of people are home right now. I was going for a walk around my little village the other day, and there was a small group of, they must have been in their late 70s, and his husband and wife, or hey, whatever, how it goes, whatever, 2 of them are standing either side, and they were talking about life out there, about extraterrestrial life. And I'm going, wow, because these stories will appear generally in the mainstream news, just like they'll be there and then they're gone, right?
Yeah.
And because, it's about building short attention spans, because we know it's like, the measles thing was like the big scary boogeyman, then all of a sudden it just went away.
Yeah.
And then nobody's talking about it. So it shows kind of where our sort of attention span is. But I think with the disclosure thing, I think because I've been listening to all the big commentators on this topic, and I think that it's going to be I think it is going to be this partial rollout of technology just suddenly emerging out of somewhere. And I mean, I say this to people. I say, look, do you think some guy in a lab all of a sudden, he's made a discovery, and then he comes running out on the street and goes, "Eureka! I've discovered anti-gravity." It just doesn't happen.
No.
And and that yeah, and I say to people, why do you think it is the government has defense contractors that they farm out the work to? It's because it makes them unbeholden to the Freedom of Information Act as a starter. But there's stuff going on. There's stuff, they've got answers to everything. I think I'm really excited, Sol, I have to say, because I know that we're on the cusp of some big awakenings, and people are really starting to feel. In fact, like in this sort of last 10-ish minutes, we'll definitely cut it off at 5:02.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your sort of take on what's happening at the moment with this global experience from your perspective, how you perceive it. Maybe you've received information from others, but I mean, this is really prime ground for introducing new concepts to the public. And like I said, we had the timing of that release from the government last week or the week before, which wasn't just like, well, because this is the real deal. This recent one was, we don't know what these things are, and these videos are legit. But as far as what's going on with this, I don't. It's not even about the virus. It's more than that. It's just that's the thing that's got everyone's attention. But there's bigger things happening. So please, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, sure. So I guess to sort of summarize, because we do have a limited amount of time. For me personally, it is about trusting what feels right. So with the whole COVID thing, everyone is saying, even mainstream or you want to think in Harry Potter terms, muggles are even saying something doesn't feel right. You've got to trust that, and you've got to look at it and go, why doesn't it feel right? And look at the stats, but also look at positive things that do work to help build that immune system. I think knowledge is power. Also, fear lowers the immune system, so really trying not to step into fear. But I think there's a positive of we have more time at the moment. Those that are lucky of us to be able to sort of go within, or be lucky enough to not have to work as much at the moment, although my work's just sort of switch work to doing my own personal work, which I'm loving. But yeah, when is it that you get to have an extended amount of time at home like this, or with family? Utilize it and meditate and connect in, and start to answer your own inner questions. So I feel I'm just going to have some tea. So we are lucky that we do have that opportunity and that time, more so than ever. I think there is a lot of fear porn that is out there, and there's so much happening. The governments of the world, it's up, down, left, right. why are they giving us
mm,
like conflicting information as well? What are they trying to distract us from? And then they
mm,
release this whole Pentagon, video. So what's going on behind the backgrounds? And I know that, a lot of people are talking about children being rescued, and you see, sex trafficking being broken up all around the world. And I think that's one of the undercurrent things that's happening. But it also feels like there's a bigger part of the puzzle that is happening as well, that we're perhaps not aware of, or perhaps isn't, revealed to us just yet. But I think, on a personal level, look at the positive things and experiences and changes that you can make within, so that when we do emerge in this new time or this new period, have knowledge of your rights, find out about common law, have knowledge over your body and what your rights are, and learn about like the implications of heavy metal toxicity and injecting, certain things into your body, and also looking at how your RNA and DNA can be affected if we are to take on these so-called mark of the beast chips that Bill Gates wants to roll out. I think it's just a time to get informed and start to
mm,
exercise our conscientious objection rights, and to do it in a calm, easy way. Because is this really trying to, get us to stir things up, to get us to get angry, or, to have us be perceived in a certain way? So now is the time more than ever to really be composed about the way that we bring our
mm,
information out, and composed in the way that we act in society. I know there was a poor woman who just had her child taken off her at a peaceful walk protest, just, advocating for rights, and she did everything
mm.
right and calm, and it's helping to draw positive attention to things. So I think, if everyone can just be on their best behavior at this time, but still, like, being exposed to the right knowledge and things, and knowing what they should say and what they can say, I think it's really important.
Yeah, you raised some good points there, and we're going to have to wrap it up in a sec, of course. But this whole thing about you know, um, you, and I'm talking to everyone, everyone over there. The camera's around the other way. It's like you are your responsibility.
Yeah.
It is your job to create a temple worthy of spirit to dwell in, to quote from the mystery schools. And if you are, there are those that would seek to have ready access to as much of your being as possible, those outside you who may not have the best interest for you people. And so, you understanding what rights are, the fact that there are rights that are as natural as gravity, that are immutable, that cannot be cancelled, and understanding what those are. And and that's where understanding the seeking, like studying the occult, and what the mystery schools have been teaching, because this is information that it was hidden for a reason, because it creates a power differential. Those who know and those who don't. And so that's so cool. But anyway, rather than me just get into a big monologue here, I just want to say, just in closing here, that this has been so lovely, and I really like to do this again, Sol. Because we've really only kind of scratched the surface on some topics here.
Yeah.
And I know that there's probably a bunch of people who have been watching this who would really like to hear some more, because people love hearing about, obviously, experiences and that, and we've thrown a few out there. But you've done you've been interviewed quite a bit. You've done a fair bit of travel. You've been in this arena for a while now and speaking out, and I love you so much for that, sister, because you're a beacon of courage for a lot of people who are wanting to recognize and work with their gifts and talents, or to propagate them within themselves, because like you said, we've all got access to this stuff, but it can be a bit daunting for some. Not everyone's ready, and we'll get through these things in our own time. But what I want to do is just give you this last moment here to just to do some drop some, what is it, a shameless plug on your services and your website and things like that. So please take the floor.
Thank you. And I just love and appreciate everything that you're doing, and thank you so much for having me on the show. And this has just been such an exciting conversation for me to dive into some different subjects that I don't usually get to talk on, like looking at biofeedback and looking at the brain and looking at how we can sort of like, change our consciousness and kind of like lift that platform to raise ourselves to that next state. So one thing I've got coming up is next weekend on the 24th, which I think is a Sunday, 24th of May, at around like 1:40, I'm going to be teaching about the psychic senses and how to find out like which is your strongest psychic sense, and looking at the spiritual anatomy and how we can kind of like install new software and work with flooding light into these areas. So that's going to be something that's coming up. So to get more information, it's going to be the Spiritual Events Directory Expo. So that will be available to live stream and jump on that workshop. I think it's like $11.11, but I think it's like a 6-hour event or something like that. There's going to be various speakers and various workshop facilitators. So I'm one of the workshop facilitators. I also write for their magazine as well as a psychic, and do a show every Thursday night between 6 and 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So you can find that on the Spiritual Events Directory, where I answer psychic questions and do like an overall read for the collective as well. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. More information on my website as well, and Facebook and Instagram.
Cool, guys. The website's down below on the scrolling bar. If you can't see it there, you've probably seen, your subconscious has got it anyway. So you probably wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, why the heck have I got this thing on my mind? You don't, it's not a Big Mac you want. You want to go and check out Sol's website, hit her up for a reading. She's got a very unique, well, I think it's unique way of doing readings for people. And, maybe we'll talk about that on the next one, because it's very cool. And yeah, and it's very colourful too. I love that part about what you do. So
thanks, Phil.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to catch up again. And well, thank you. And yeah, we'll catch up offline another time and do some more freestyle, because this was so much fun. I've had such a good time today. So you have a beautiful day.
You too. Thank you so much, Phil. And thank you everyone for
You're very welcome. Yes, thank you, everyone. And I just want to quickly put in that I've got another show tomorrow night, and I'll drop another ad for that. But this video here will be available on YouTube and BitChute within the next day, guys. So if you want to watch it at your own pace, it'll be available. So thank you, Sol. You have a beautiful day. And yeah,
I'll chat to you soon.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Phil. Bye.
See you. Bye.